Take it away, Frank.
This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, former writer, full-time observer, joined by former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, Mr. Jack Hirsch, excuse maker for the New York Jets. How are you doing tonight, Jack?
Hey, good. They had a bye, so no excuses.
They didn't lose.
They haven't lost. They'll go a couple of weeks at least without losing because they won the week before.
Well, nothing has changed on this end, Jack. I still hate the Eagles. I still think they're going to the Super Bowl. And my Miami Dolphins are who I thought they were. They're a bad organization, and they have to burn the whole thing down. Getting rid of the GM was a good start, but way more than that.
Yeah, maybe we should compare players to fighters, but I tend to do it with teams. And when you compared the Dolphins to Joe Hip, I thought that was a little extreme.
Well, Jack, first of all, I was being funny with that. Now, if I was going to pick a fighter who the Dolphins are, they would be, oh boy, Jack, can you help me with this?
Stop, you buddy.
I mean, that's not that bad. I actually think he may be a better fighter than they are team. It's like he went the distance with some good guys. Whenever Miami plays a contender, they get blown out. So, Jack, we have a guest tonight. We have Don Majeski, who is one of the better historians in the country, in the world, who speaks of boxing. We're going to talk to him about the state of boxing. I think he's a hater like me a little bit, where he finds a lot of fault with it. And here's another example, Jack. There's a decent fight this weekend, a junior middleweight fight between two contenders, Lubin and I guess Ortiz holds a belt. So it's a title fight, but it's on.
Ortiz, Erickson, Lubin. I don't want to hear about NABF belts, sanctioning body belts necessarily, because I kind of lose track. Okay?
But Ortiz does have a belt, and it's a world title belt.
But I'm
so it's going to be a title fight.
But it's to me, it's more like a tune-up. It's a viable fight. Erickson Lubin is a viable opponent. I seriously doubt that he, could spring an upset here, but it's possible. He come under the category a long shot. I'm not going to say he has no shot, but he's a
long shot, no doubt.
Erickson Lubin was actually signed by a group that Mike Tyson was involved with coming out of the amateurs. And the amateur officials were a bit upset when the Erickson Lubin turned pro, because they thought he was a serious medal hope, if he stayed amateur, fought in the Olympics for the USA. As a pro, he's been kind of like a little on the disappointing side. He's been the equivalent. He's like getting someone who you think's a great pitcher, you're signing to a contract, and he's like your 4th or 5th start, as it turns out. Now, he's not your ace. He's good enough to barely crack the starting rotation. And Ortiz, the big talk with him, I guess, is how he's going to do against Boots Ennis, because Boots appears to be next on the agenda for Ortiz. And that's where I think the excitement is going to lie. So I don't think Ortiz can just win this fight. I think he's got to win it in style. Ortiz has got to turn in a dominating performance that'll put doubt in people's minds whether or not Boots Ennis would even beat him when they fight.
Well, I don't think there's anything that Ortiz could do in this fight.
I think we froze up.
Then
I hear you now.
He's better than Lubin. He does everything better than Lubin. Lubin will be there and try to fight him. Lubin will make it interesting for a while, but he just doesn't have the guns to beat Ortiz. But it should be a good fight while it lasts. Sadly, nobody will see it. Nobody, unless you're an ardent boxing fan, will see it because it's on the Zone. Nobody knows what the Zone is. They don't like the way it's run. You still have to pay for big fights, and it's just not a good model. I don't think, Jack.
It's not going to take off. But you reminded me of something where I was having some doubt. Going back to when Canelo fought Terence Crawford, a little while ago. I mentioned to you a couple of weeks before the fight, Frank, there's no buzz, there's no excitement. And you told me, wait until the week of the fight. It starts building the last few days, and you nailed it perfectly. It was a mega event the last few days because there's a fight, or I guess it's a fight, we could call it. Some people might think it's an exhibition, and I have some doubt whether it's a fight or an exhibition, but it's advertised as a fight the following weekend, Jake Paul and Tank Davis. There's no buzz around that fight right now.
Yeah, that may be canceled though, because Tank got in trouble.
But it hasn't been canceled. That's the point.
I'll be surprised if that goes through.
Yeah, if it was going to get canceled, wouldn't it have been canceled by now? And that show is going to be on Netflix. So they can get actually a super big audience because it's not pay-per-view. And it's Jake Paul, who, let's face it, Jake Paul has a following. So no matter who he boxes, there's going to be semi-interest just by the evidence of us talking about it now. But could you imagine his fight with Tank is 100% on the level? And can you imagine if Tank shows up ready to fight, really ready? That would be interesting because Tank is way ahead of Jake Paul. But Jake Paul.
But the size, Jack.
But the size, but, let me throw this by you. And we'll throw this by a boxing historian later, Don Majeski. It wasn't uncommon for smaller guys to spar with bigger guys. I mean, this goes back to mentality. If that was the mentality even in the 1970s around then,
But Jack, this is at least 50 pounds, and Jake Paul is a legitimate 200-pounder, maybe even a little bigger. And he was in there it was an old Mike Tyson, and Tyson couldn't get off because of his age, but it's like he still wasn't manhandled by a guy that big, and that's Mike Tyson. I know he was 57 or 58 years old, but I just can't see Tank doing anything. It's got to be an exhibition, Jack. It can't be for real.
I can't imagine it, but how are they going to stage it? And it would be demeaning for Tank to stage an exhibition and let Paul get the better of him. It would kind of be demeaning, in that sense.
They'll come out with a situation, Jack, where they both look good.
You know who's been in the news this week in a roundabout way? Anthony Joshua. Because Jake Paul has called Anthony Joshua out. He wants to fight him. And according to Virgil Hunter, who trained Andre Ward, was his mentor, he's claiming Andre Ward's in the gym working hard, and Ward will only come back if he could fight Anthony Joshua. Ward has always had this thing about Joshua. Ward's always said, I don't want to fight heavyweights. But except for one heavyweight, Anthony Joshua, he's the one heavyweight I could beat. So it's as if Ward knows something. Ward wants no part of Usyk. He wants no part of Fury. But something about Joshua.
Yeah, they see him as a wounded prey. That's why.
No, but he said it when Joshua was good a few years ago. That's the odd part about it. He perceives certain flaws in Joshua, but Ward's 41 years old. 41 years old. How much money could he get for the fight? And, we'll see. Jake Paul's a more viable thing, but why would Paul want to fight Joshua? Paul's not beating Joshua.
Jack, because it would be a ton of money, and maybe he feels he can get lucky. That's all. He has nothing to lose. Joshua's a former heavyweight champion, a legit former heavyweight champion. So he has nothing to lose. But the fact that we're talking about this and we're not talking about real fights is just another example and layer of proof why boxing is in the state that it is. It's like we need gimmick fights. And I don't know if you saw the comment that Terence Crawford made the other day. I I'd seen it before, but now it's getting legs, where he basically said, as much as he is a fan of this fighter and thinks he's great and holds him in the utmost regard, he said that Floyd Mayweather, as I have said, is the reason that boxing is in the state it is in today, because everybody wants to protect that O. And once you get defeated, you have to go all the way back to the line, unless you're a heavyweight. A good win gets you back in the picture. But the point is,
I hear you, but I know what you were gonna. We could segue to that has to do with what you're talking about this second. You wanted to wish a happy birthday to Larry Holmes, great heavyweight champion, correct?
well, I thought you were going to talk about that later, but yeah, okay.
No, because I'm making the point, the unbeaten thing started with Holmes going after the so-called Marciano record, making a big fuss about it. A big fuss. So he built that record up. He came one fight short. So he laid the groundwork for Mayweather.
Jack, you could say that. I'm not sure I agree with that, because that was 35 years ago. And I think Mayweather has taken it to a higher level. And I think with the generation that we have today, and I was having this discussion the other night with a friend of mine, and it's like if Usyk and Crawford both retire undefeated, we're going to see a poll in a couple years where if Ibro does an all-time great poll and they rank him, we're going to see Usyk among the top 10 heavyweights because he will retire undefeated. We will see Crawford up there with the pound-for-pound greats and the probably best welterweights. I think they both have a case for that. But the point is, Jack, if they retired undefeated, it just changes everything. And I'll give you a couple examples. Okay. Do you agree or not that the 2007 New England Patriots are one of the greatest teams you ever saw?
I agree.
Okay. They lost on the last drive of the Super Bowl and nobody talks about them. And Tom Brady has said repeatedly, he says, nobody asked me about the Super Bowls I won. All they talk about is the Philly special and the Tyree helmet catch. Look at Mayweather. Never lost. Whenever you see guys debate hypothetical fights, he gets the advantage. The 72 Miami Dolphins, I'm a Dolphins fan, Jack. They played 3 teams with a winning record during the season, and they're always in the pantheon of the greatest of the greats because they never lost.
They're really not when you see most polls that are being
NFL
taken.
Films has them number 1, Jack.
It had to be done a lot of years ago.
No, this was last year. They had number 1. They had the 85 Bears number 2.
The Miami Dolphin team was not, there were at least 10 teams that won Super Bowls.
Jack, the 73 Dolphins were better than the 72 Dolphins, but nobody talked about them because they had 2 losses. So my point is, and which I've said all along, and Crawford has backed it up, and he's undefeated, and he even realizes it. When undefeated carries too much weight. Think about this, Jack. How would Marciano be regarded if he didn't get the decision against La Starza? How would Mayweather be looked at if he didn't get the decision against Castillo in the first fight? And what if Terence Crawford loses the decision
I got someone to answer that. Let's bring on our guest. Okay, you're talking about boxing history. Let me introduce him. Don Majeski, international agent. He was a boy wonder once in the business. It's like, I think, a 16-year-old. He was an advisor to George Parnassus, the great promoter from California, put on the shows in the Inglewood Forum. And we're starting to get into boxing history, Don. Okay. And we were just talking about unbeaten champions like Floyd Mayweather. How important is it to keep the O next to the record? You tell us.
Good evening, Don. Jack won't let me say anything. Good evening, Don.
My apologies. Frank Laterzo.
Yes, Frank. We've met
on the show a while ago before. My apologies, Frank.
No.
That's all right, Jack.
I just want to correct. I was never an advisor to George Parnassus. The only time I advised him, Jose Napoles ended up losing the title in Syracuse. But he was a great inspiration to me and a wonderful human being to have known, plus the many I have.
Don, let me frame the question a little bit different than Jack, okay? we're talking about undefeated fighters because Terrence Crawford came out and said that because of Floyd Mayweather, you don't see the best guys fight the best anymore because they're all protecting that O. And here you have Mayweather, who's retired, undefeated, and in a lot of circles, and I think as the years go by and the three of us are gone, his legacy will grow. But what I was saying to Jack was, what if he doesn't get the decision in the first Castillo fight? What if Marciano doesn't get the decision in the first Roland Lastaros fight? If Terrence Crawford loses the decision in one of his next two fights, it'll be he'll drop down. Or if Usyk loses a decision before he retires, all of a sudden he won't be that great. So that's how we were framing the undefeated argument.
Listen, I think about this all the time, and it has ruined boxing to a great degree. If I was given a seminar on managers and how to manage a fighter, I would tell every one of them, the first thing you do when you sign a fighter is get him defeated in his first pro fight, and then you can take your career from there. Everyone having to be undefeated just beats the fact of the uniqueness of the unbeaten record. That's the goal of everyone. They never want to lose a fight anymore. And if you look at Marciano, he won every fight. He wasn't just undefeated. He won every fight he ever had. He was the first heavyweight in history to box for a world title who had won every fight. Do you know how many there have been since then? 50. 50 since 1952, 0 up to 52. It says something about how boxing's been manipulated. You now guide a fighter. He's got a good amateur background, Olympic gold medal, a national Golden Gloves title. To keep him as undefeated as you can, it's an absurdity. It's too much burden on the fighter. And then when you want to match these guys, they wanted a disproportionate amount of money to basically sell that loss. It's ridiculous. It really started to take essence when Ali came out of the Olympics in 1960 and he won the title as the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world. But that wasn't up by design. Or was Marciano undefeated by design? They just happened to stand up and get those decisions. Now you absolutely manipulate a fighter.
It's manufactured today.
Correct, 100%. Then in '76, all those Olympians who came out were undefeated when they fought for the title. John Tate, Michael Spinks, Leon Spinks, Sugar Ray Leonard, Howard Davis. They're all great fighters, but they were moved. But it really took effect 1984 when you had those Olympians turn pro in the Garden. With Biggs, with Holyfield, with Whitaker, with Meldrick Taylor. I think who else? Virgil Hill.
Virgil Hill.
So,
well, in all fairness, Don, the '76 Olympic team wasn't matched easy early on. Keep in mind, Leon Spinks' match with Scott Ledoux, tough opponent. They fought to a draw. And,
absolutely, but I'm saying everybody aspired to do that. That was the role model. We have to be undefeated afterwards. Everybody thought that, and then by '84. Main Events, which is a management group, not a promotional group. So a promoter promotes for the public, a manager manages for his fighter. Their idea was to keep their fighters winning all the time, whether they're Olympians or not. And that was the mindset. And they made a lot of money. It was good. But now it's come back to bite us. I mean, it's ridiculous that everybody should be undefeated. But that's a planned strategy. They have a career that's orchestrated. And it stops them, as you said, for 100%. It's hurt the industry. It's hurt the fighters. It's hurt everybody in the long run. It's ridiculous.
The problem is the fans are trained that way too, Don. The fans are basically trained that if you're not undefeated, you're not worth our time. And if you lose a fight, that's why I have so much respect for a guy like Parker, who has stayed busy. He doesn't win all the time, but he's in the mix. And it's like he keeps getting big fights. But how many of them are there?
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, he's willing to fight. He's sort of the George Chuvalo of his generation. I mean, who would you say was a more successful fighter based on their career? Jerry Cooney or George Chuvalo? Financially, Cooney, but who was the more successful fighter?
I mean, you might have to say Chuvalo and Quarry definitely over both of them.
Chuvalo, absolutely. Cooney, even though I like Jerry a lot personally, okay? He had kind of an incomplete career. I hate saying it. You don't get the feeling that he had a complete career. Not so much
because he was managed to be undefeated and the Great White Hope, and that's what happened. So he never improved.
But after he lost to Holmes, put it on Cooney. He never really got it back together again. And by the time he fought Spinks and Foreman, he himself was past his peak. It was they were big money grabs, those fights. And meanwhile, Chuvalo would fight everyone.
Yeah.
And once in a while, he would win a big fight, like against Quarry, against Doug Jones. And his losses, for the most part, he was extremely competitive in those fights. He pushed Floyd Patterson harder than anyone maybe ever pushed Floyd Patterson in a loss.
Maybe he beat Bonavina too, and he didn't get the decision.
Yeah, I mean, he fought, and when he fought Ali for the title the first time in '66, he had come off a loss in his previous fight to Eduardo Corletti, who's little known today. So even the loss didn't affect it. So a guy could come off, and they fought in Toronto, Chuvalo's hometown. They drew a very
with 17 days notice.
Yes,
good one.
16,000 people in the arena. He lost. He had a longer career after that fight than he did prior to it, and fought Jimmy Ellis and fought Ernie Terrell for the WBA title. So it didn't affect him. Try doing that today, Jack and Frank. Say, I got a guy loses and wins, but he's going to fight for the world title because we can draw money. It's something they couldn't even imagine. It's horrible. And
Ron Lyle lost to Jimmy Young and got a shot at Ali.
Yeah. Yes, you fought, you lost, you won. So what?
You mentioned Quarry, a white heavyweight. He took a loss, his first loss against Eddie Machin, a guy much more experienced than him. Today, they wouldn't take that risk.
And why do you think that is?
But Frank was mentioning a little before you came on about rating guys' divisions. I don't think it's as important anymore because of all the weight divisions we have and the way fighters move around weight division to weight division. And I've talked in the past, Roy Jones, who's considered the best fighter pound for pound of his era, you don't have an exact weight division that he stayed in long enough. Marvin Hagler, for example, he was a middleweight his whole career. So of course you could rate him and Monzon as middleweights. So Roy Jones gets the bad end of the stick when you start rating guys in their divisions because his name disappears because he was never in a division long enough to dominate it to give him the high ranking.
Oh, I do believe he had about a dozen defenses of the. Sorry about this. Is the problem of calling from home. He did have a dozen defenses of the light heavyweight title. So I mean,
you're right, and so that's why I would consider him as a light heavyweight.
But
Don.
It doesn't do him justice because his whole body of work could have been, let's say, comparing him to Bob Foster, Roy Jones. I could argue that Jones's body of work over his career was greater than Foster's, but you're not going to rate him ahead of Foster as a light heavyweight because if you're just looking at the division, that's what I mean.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like Sam Langford is a classic example of that. He fought from every division from like welterweight, lightweight, all the way up to heavyweight. Where would you put him? I assume if you could do it, you got their weights, throw them all on the computer, and then divide that number by the amount of fights they have. You come out with the median weight. I guess you could do that with Roy Jones, wherever people perceive him. I mean, he first achieved greatness as a middleweight and then moved up to light heavyweight.
He only had a couple title fights at 160, but I think he made his mark at super middleweight and light heavyweight. I think if you go back and look at his record, there's a close to 20 title fights there. That's a good body of work.
Right.
By the way, Don Majeski, Don, let me just say to people listening that Don's an international agent and Don has done it all. And Frank, Don was in Zaire. When Ali knocked out Foreman, actually in Zaire, and there's this photo taken with Don and Jim Brown in it in Zaire. I mean, talk about something.
Jim had the better seat. He was in front of me. I had to take a back seat.
And why Don isn't in the International Boxing Hall of Fame is beyond me. And you see the amount of people in it who boxing seems to some of them to be a glorified hobby in comparison to Don, who made his living in the sport, who accomplished so much, but what can I say?
I appreciate.
But Don, you went to the Rumble in the Jungle?
Yes, I was there. A friend of
mine. That must have been something.
It was a unique experience. It was the day before my birthday, which was October 31st. I think and we sort of ended right on the cusp of that with the time. But what had happened is I had friends of mine wrote for Esto. It's a daily sporting paper in Mexico City. And a fellow, Rafael Mendoza, who happens to be in the Hall of Fame, much more deservedly than me, and a lot of people as well. But he The first fight, if you recall, was canceled. Foreman got a cut. Bill McMurray was the sparring partner.
Yeah.
And strangely
8 days
enough,
before the fight.
yes, the company that had sponsored the airfares was Icelandic Airways. So people flew to Reykjavik, Iceland. Insane and incongruously go from Reykjavik then to Zaire at the time, Kinshasa. No Zaire now, it's the Congo again. But they canceled that flight, so they had a photographer, my friend Raphael, going to cover it. And he called me. He said, "Would you like?" I was going to Hostos Community College at the time. Had a job working at the cafeteria that's across the street from Yankee Stadium. It's the only stand-up job I ever had besides doing anything in boxing, and it was only lasted a week. And he calls me. There were no cell phones there. And I got a call from my mother, and she called the cafeteria. Said, "Don, it's an emergency." I thought somebody was dying in my family. You got a call from Mexico. They want you to call them right away. So I called Collect from the cafeteria. He said, "Listen, we can't cover the fight. We already bought the tickets. And in those days, the tickets were interchangeable. You have your name on there. I put my name on there. There was nothing with the security we have now post 9/11. And anyway, they said, you want to use the ticket? We'll get you a ticket in New York and go directly to Zaire." I said, "What? Do I want it?" I handed in my notice. I walked away, and that was the last time I ever did anything with boxing. And then I went over there, and it was quite amazing. We ended up staying at the Intercontinental Hotel, and everything was corruption. You wanted to go downtown. They were taking people to a camp called Encili, which they had the press and the fighters. And I was on a plane with a fellow from Venezuela, Miguel Thode. We ended up sharing the room. He's a broadcaster. And we didn't want to go to Encili. We wanted to go to Kinshasa. So they said, "Well, we can't take it. Absolutely impossible. However, for $20, we might be able to do it. $20. We get down going to the Intercontinental Hotel, and we're driving around. And I said, "Where is this Intercontinental Hotel?" "Well, we'll find it. We'll get there. I said, "Look, I can't be waiting all night." They said, "Well, I can't find it, but we can locate it. For $20, we'll be able to get you there." Another $20.
What a hustle.
We get into the Intercontinental Hotel, and the guy says, "Absolutely, positively, there's not a room available. We're overbooked. We're oversold. There's no one. You can't even sleep in the lobby." I said, "We have to do something." "Well, for $20. So we go upstairs into the room, and there's clothes hanging in the closet. I said, "What's this?" I went downstairs. I said, "There's clothes hanging in the closet. There's somebody obviously in that room." He said, No. That man, he went to Kenya for 3 days. He'll be back on the 1st of December. By the time he gets back, you'll be gone. Just don't use the closet with his clothes in it. Back upstairs." And it was like that all through the whole situation. But anyway, the fight, it's odd. The fight was phenomenal. I thought, Foreman was winning early, and Ali turned it around. I don't know if that rope-a-dope was by design or necessity, frankly. But
I think he made that up on the fly, Jack.
Mhm.
Don, I really do.
Well, he did in the gym. Ali would practice that, even though he might not have planned to fight that way. He made the adjustment. It went back to Ali's early days, even when he fought Liston. He sometimes, would lie on the ropes and had a thing about letting the opponent punching himself out. But yeah, I get the feel. I agree with Frank. I kind of feel he made it up on the fly. And even Ali said as much. He said after one round, he was way too tired.
Yeah, he said he couldn't Foreman was cutting the ring off with taking 2 steps.
Oh,
yeah.
And he was
But did you sense the fight turn? Did you feel before Ali knocked out Foreman? Could you sense it was turning around? Did you feel Ali was going to win at any point before the knockout?
I felt in the first round he won the first round. Ali, he came out and he set the pace. But after the second, third, you could see Foreman, if they're always going to stop him, he's pounding. If you see that, pounding. But it was I likened it to like one of these big balloons, and it's deflating. And with each round, you'd see the punches less often and less ponderous. So you saw him like slowly running out of steam, a little slower in the third, a little slower in the fourth. And it was oppressively hot, but more so the humidity was incredible. So, if you're running around, walking around hot and humidity, and you could literally taste the moisture in the air. And you could see Foreman slowly slowing down. And then Ali, I think, just outlasted him. Sort of like Quarry and Chuvalo. Remember that crazy shot? We threw the one shot. But,
I was at that show at the Garden. That was kind of flukish.
Yeah.
Because I think Quarry got up when he got up after being knocked down. He decided he was going to taken 9 counts. He got
Yeah.
down to a knee. Why rush? And I think he just lost his concentration because the moment Zach Clayton waved, that's it. Corey jumped to his feet like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I think it was a mental lapse.
Well, similarly with Foreman and Ali, if you recall the Foreman-Jimmy Young fight, under sort of the same situation, he fought in a hot tropical climate with a boxer, and he sort of ran out of steam. He should have.
And
Well,
he
let
didn't
me
get,
ask you this.
Don, he didn't get there till the day before the fight.
Yeah.
Young
Very
got
cool.
there 10 days before the fight and got adjusted to the climate. Foreman didn't get to Puerto Rico till like the afternoon before the fight, the night of the fight.
Right,
I
and
think-
And he also was worried about his stamina. I blame Gil Clancy. As great as Gil Clancy is,
Mm.
I have an issue with him because I really think he hurt Foreman for the fact that I think he sealed the fact that he didn't have stamina, and he made him a wait and react counterpuncher, and that just took the bullets out of Foreman's gun. I used to train with Jimmy Young, Don. I knew him, and he said to me, he goes, I would not have defeated the Foreman who fought Ali, but the one I fought was a different guy.
Mm-hmm. And you would think, knowing what he knew from Zaire, they would get there. Well, I'll just finish. So it was like he's deflating as the rounds went by. And two factors. One is when they called off the fight, and Foreman said that because I was friendly with their camp than Ali's, more accessible. And Dick Sadler, who was his trainer, said they felt like they were in a prison. When they called the fight, Foreman wanted to leave Zaire and said, I'll go. And they have every intention of coming back. He's getting $5 million. They wouldn't let him leave. He was in like a glass-lined prison. He couldn't get out. Ali was revered, even though it was a Catholic country. He was a Muslim, but it was Muhammad Ali. And Foreman was the enemy, and Ali was quick with the quips. He went all around.
Ali turned him into the villain.
Yeah. He was the villain. And Foreman, to go outside, he was chided. He wanted to leave. He couldn't leave. Remember, he was a youngish guy at that time. He hadn't been
25 years old.
Well, there's a funny story, though, that the people there in Zaire, they hated German shepherds because law enforcement would use German shepherds to keep them in line, And Foreman got off the plane with a German shepherd, not realizing that was
two of them, Jack. Two of them.
Two of them. That's even worse.
No, he lost the fight. He lost his wife. I mean, he lost everything in that enterprise. The most poignant memory I have, though, aside from the Ali fight, was there was a fighter there, Roy Williams, and he went over there to spar with Ali. Yeah. And Henry Clark went over to spar with Foreman because they could emulate the styles of both. And they were what we call the walkout bout for 10 rounds. Now, you could hear the thunder, thunder catches up with the lightning in the distance, and everybody's sort of looking over their shoulder. Will this fight end? Will we able to get in? And the clouds are coming around. I said, the moisture, the humidity, it's ready to explode. And so help me, it was like a fate. The moment the fight was over, they announced the winner within minutes, literal minutes.
Started pouring.
Clouds were rumbling, and in the ring, they rush. Oh, so Roy Williams was friendly. Oh, Don, I'm so happy you're here. And he said, I had tears, and I finally got a fight. Nobody would fight this guy. Larry fought him once. Larry Holmes ducked him, wouldn't give him the rematch. Couldn't get fights. Finally goes to Zaire. He's there with Foreman all those weeks postponement. He's going to fight finally. Henry Clark is there. They're gloved up. They're in the ring. And as they're ready to announce a fight, so help me, the clouds burst out. It was like Noah's Ark. Kaboom. We thought a bomb went off. And the rain, and it came down torrentially, and the poor guy couldn't fight. And the look in that Roy Williams' eyes is still with me today. He felt he was so happy. He's on the big show, waited all that time, going through the postponement, and a second before he's ready to fight, the fight's called off.
Don, you knew Roy Williams?
Yes. Did you know him? What became of him? I know he had a shooting in a bar and something like that.
I didn't know him. I saw him in the gym a few times, but the stories of him sparring are legendary. Nobody handled him in the gym.
Yes.
But sometimes in the fight, he would clam up sometimes and not fight to his ability. It's like how he lost to Richard Dunn. I'll never know.
And he made that great fight with you. I have a great anecdote with that. I had a heavyweight that I worked with, Bernardo Mercado, and was Larry getting ready for the Norton fight. And Richie Giacchetti were friendly. It was very friendly with me, one of my better friends. And Don King and I always had knocking heads. It just came to that. But I was never on his level, but I was more like a thorn in his toe rather than anything else. Having said that, so I brought Mercado up to train at Grossinger's, and Larry was sparring, and he's sparring the guys, and he's looking good. And Larry couldn't stand Roy Williams, and the fellow at Mercado, a guy named Joe Conforti, had signed Roy Williams. He had a fellow, it's Tony Strazzeri, was with him from the very beginning, an Italian-American guy from Philly, and his brother Ben Strazzeri. So he had Roy Williams. Roy, he would fight anybody, but nobody would fight him of any consequence. So we had him up there, and Holmes was out of sparring partners. He wanted to spar Mercado. I said, no, he's coming up. He's got to fight. He said, all right, I'll let Roy Williams will spar with him, as Tony Strazzeri says. Roy Williams will spar with him. And Larry, they knew each other from the amateurs. I guess one was from Philly, the other guy from Easton, and they had boxed. I think they once fought pro, and Larry beat him, never give him the rematch.
They fought on the Allie Young undercard
Okay. So
in Maryland.
Yeah, a rivalry going back to the time they were teenagers. So he said, all right, Richie, I don't know. This guy's going to try to butt him or something. So they get in the ring, and Tony Strazzeri, a little guy, he was about 70 at the time. He says, butt him, hit him, we'll get the fight. We'll get the Norton fight. Of course, it was never going to happen. So Roy goes in there, and the first round they come up, it was like the Ali Frazier. He's winging away, and Larry's winging away, and he says, all right. Richie says, I think that's enough. No, Larry says, one more round. Yeah, one more round. Okay, they go to the second round. Larry beats the heck out of Williams, and Williams says, one more round. All right, one more round. Now Giacchetti screaming, get out. Now, as this happens, there was like a little ski chalet in like a skiing, you buy ski things that had the ring set up in there at skiing equipment for groceries. It was a little, like a cabana, little round building. So we're in there, and there's about 10, 15 people. But as word gets out that this thing is going like a championship fight, then there's 20 people, then there's 25 people, then there's starts like everybody from the hotel starts leaving the swimming pool and leaving the rest. They're coming to see these two guys fight. Fifth round, one more round. Giacchetti, get out of the ring. So as he's screaming about the sixth round, the phone rings. It's Don King. What's going on up there? Because people were calling him, get him out the ring, get him the F out of the ring, get him out of the ring. And he said, Larry, get out of the ring. No, one more round, one more. And Larry's, his lip is bleeding, and Roy's nose is bleeding, and then one more. I swear to God, they boxed 13 rounds sparring. No one would give quarter because Larry didn't want to be called a coward. He didn't want to be called a coward. King is, the phone is hanging. I close my eyes. The phone is hanging there. It's an old telephone, the rotary phone. And he's screaming, get them out of the ring, get them out of the ring. Don King screaming, got $1 million fight, get them out. One more round. They battled it out. It was as good a fight I ever saw in my life.
That's a great.
They fired Roy Williams, had to leave camp the next day.
That's a great story, Don. But since you were with Bernardo Mercado, I have to ask you this.
Yes.
Were you at the Bernardo Mercado Tex Cobb fight?
I was not. I had split with them at that time. So no, I can't. I was up to him.
Have you ever heard anything about it?
No, I haven't. I know that Cobb beat him. It was late in his one of the later fights of his career. Yes, that I remember.
Well, I was at that fight because that was on the undercard of Holmes and Snipes.
Oh, okay.
And I went there with Cobb, and I don't think you ever saw the fight, Jack. And Don, you didn't see it.
That was in Pittsburgh.
It's at Civic Arena.
Yeah, right.
I've never seen a copy of that fight, but let me just tell you this: that was his great. Not so much skill, but as far as a fight, a two-way back and forth fight. If you want to talk about a hidden classic, Cobb Mercado is one of the best heavyweight fights I ever saw. And Cobb told me that other than Ernie Shavers, Mercado was the hardest puncher he ever was in the ring with.
He was a great puncher. He knocked out in one round. Yeah.
It's unfortunate that Mercado's legacy, when you mention his name, people don't think of the Cobb fight, the fights. They think of him getting beaten by Leon Spinks. Spinks having kind of a revival, and that got Spinks' opportunity to fight Holmes for the title. Had Mercado won that fight, he may have been in fighting Holmes.
I think that was on the Allie Holmes undercard, Spinks and Mercado.
Spinks Mercado was, yes, I believe that was. Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Were you weren't in Manila by any chance, were you?
No, I wasn't. I was at the first.
Like, no. The reason I'm saying it because I mentioned to Frank last week, we were talking about the thrill in Manila, and what's never mentioned, and you can relate to this, Don, being in Zaire, the heat and humidity. I think what did Frazier in and helped Ali win the fight, Ali was able to adjust to the weather conditions in Manila. It was like a steam bath, and that sometimes makes all the difference between winning and losing. We saw it with Robinson and LaMotta, and that's, I think the heat just hit Frazier. he hit a wall like a marathon runner
Yeah.
running on a hot day. The heat
Mhm.
and humidity all of a sudden gets to you. And once it gets to you, there's no coming back from it.
And that was not an air conditioned venue.
No, I'll tell you. Well, that's what they don't. And I would tell you, the aggressive fighter is going to suffer more because they're expending more energy. You know, the boxer has the advantage because he's sort of laying back and waiting for you to take the lead. So you see, with Foreman doing the punching, Frazier doing the aggressive fighting. I do.
Don, I want to get on a couple other topics, but one of them, I want to give you your chance to vent about the current state of boxing. No boxing department in New York or Philadelphia, the way it used to be.
Yeah.
The current state of boxing really, in our private conversations, I'm sure I could relay this, makes you very unhappy to say the least. Go ahead, vent.
Yeah, well, I don't want to sound like I'm an old guy now.
No, it's
I admit
okay.
it.
It's okay to vent. We're all old timers here. And we have the old timers, our audience, I think.
Well, look, and Frank, when you guys brought up, I just fell into that conversation, but 100% I agree with this undefeated situation. And that's part of the problem as well. They do not, promoter, because of the promotional rights, it's turned the promoter into the manager. The manager is superfluous once he signs a promotional contract. But what happens, here's how boxing is working now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jack. You're more aware of what's going on currently, or Frank. If you have a preliminary fighter and he comes mostly out of a poor area, irrespective of his culture, of his race or his ethnicity, and you have to have someone say, I'm willing to pay to put this fighter on the show. So I go to a club fight promotion. I got a kid, he's a welterweight. All right, you want him to fight? You must buy 200 tickets to cover his purse, the opponent's purse. And in many of the cases, you see these promoters charging the manager or the fighter to even box on the card. They call it a slot fee. So if you don't have the money to say, I'm going to pay my opponent $2,000 to fight me, I'll take nothing or whatever is left over. And if I can't sell tickets to cover it, I'm out that kind of money. So I'm buying fights for the first 8 or 10 fights, unless, of course, the promoter signs me up. So it's almost an impossible situation from the very beginning. The whole structure that make everybody undefeated. Then they have this A side, B side, where 99% of the time you're a fan, you want to see a competitive match. Whether the guy's record is 5 wins and 5 losses or 1 loss and 10 losses against that, you're not seeing that match. You're seeing a guy who's 10-0 against 5-5, 20-0 against 5-15, and the same 5-15 guys fighting 5 guys who are 20-0, 10 guys are 20-0. So you're not matching fights competitively. Every fight is on a club level is a means to an end to get a big payday, not an end in of itself. And if, as we said, if you lose, so what? You'll come back next month and you'll win, and it's not going to diminish your earning capacity, but it's not being thought of that way. But also, boxing was always a centralized sport. It was built around, unlike every other sport, or 99% of the time, it's built around local fighters. You go to New York to see a show, unless we're talking heavyweight world championship, where then the event itself is bigger than the sum total of the 2 parts. You're saying, I'm going to see this guy because he's from Brooklyn, and this guy's from the Bronx, or that guy's from Queens, or that one's from Jersey City, or I'm in LA and this guy's from South LA, and he fights here like the Olympic did on a regular basis. So you're really rooting for hometown guys. You go to see the New York Knicks, the New York Yankees, 99% of them live in Florida full-time, or they live in California. They're not from the area. They're drafted from wherever college they played for, and they're playing for the team. The only thing New York on them, or LA or Chicago, is the thing on their uniform. But this is really grassroots. We completely destroyed that. And people say, well, it can definitely come back, but what we need is to make boxing a major league again. And by major league is consistent major shows in the biggest cities. And my thought is, if the 5 arena owners who have the money, and you need the money, the will, and the direction. If you had the owners of Madison Square Garden, the Barclays Center, Staples Center in LA, the Wells Fargo out in Philly, and in Miami, let's just start with those 5, and they would commit to run 10 shows a year, that's 50 cards a year, with 6 fights, not 15 fights on a show that the public is bored to death. And they're not running that for the public. They're running that because people are paying for those slots. They're not running because they want to see it. And if they would do it for 4 years, you will either sink or swim with boxing. You either start to develop where you have an average crowd of, let's say, 8,000 every show, and so that's our break even, 8 to 10,000. And then the biggest show that you could build to that would draw 15,000 people. but they've got to sustain losses to do it. And fighters have got to be willing to say, you may lose this competitive fight in January, but so what? I run the building. I own the arena. Put up the money. I'll bring you back in June. I'll bring you back in September. Don't worry about the loss. I'll match you with a competitive fight then, win or lose. You get a better fight if you win. You get a more even fight if you lose, but we're going to do it. Forget about wins and losses. Make good fights, fight better competition, and we'll draw people. But you're not drawing people now because then the big fight goes to Vegas. It's like saying we're going to finish that 7th game of the World Series. Take it out of Toronto, put it in Las Vegas. What happens to those 70,000 fans that followed the team all year long? They don't have the privilege of that. You've got to build locally, and you've got to spend money, and you've got to put on competitive. And absolutely, I'm not talking about 100 years in the past. It absolutely can be done. Danny Garcia just ran a show at Barclays Center. I'm told they sold 2,500 tickets. Why? Because nobody wanted to see any of the fights. He had 13 fights on the show. If he wasn't on the show, they'd have 800 people.
I didn't know. I didn't apply for credentials for that show. I saw how many fights and all, and I saw the matchups, and I thought, why am I going? I didn't volunteer to report it for my publication. And by the time you get home from these shows, they end so late.
Yeah.
I mean, I
they got 13. They're not serving the public, they're serving
World
themselves.
Series can end 1 a.m. as far as I'm concerned. If it's a championship game or the Super Bowl, but not these fight shows. It's insane when some of them end.
Canelo and Crawford did not start. The bell did not ring until 10:01 Eastern time.
Yeah.
Crazy.
10:01.
Crazy.
Right. No, well, we took at the World Series when 18 innings and it would have ended 3. It was on the East Coast, but that's an anomaly. They didn't start that game. They didn't start the game at 11 o'clock at night. So
No, it started at 8. Right.
I don't want to. I want to go. A pet peeve of Frank's I want to discuss with you is Floyd Mayweather and his unbeaten record and his place in history as well as a result of that. And you had talked a bit about it before, about keeping fighters unbeaten, and Frank mentioned it. But Mayweather in particular, I mean, what exactly is his legacy? What should his legacy be? Maybe that's a better question.
Look, I believe 100% he's the greatest fighter of the 21st century. I don't think anybody comes close to him. The
last 25 years, let's clear it up so no one.
Yeah, well, the 21st century. I'm really, exactly. And look, I
better
think
than Terence Crawford. Wait, Frank. You could take this, Frank, with the Terence Crawford comparison.
I think as a fighter, Terence Crawford is not superior to Mayweather, but I think he's clearly a better fighter. I think he would beat him head to head, and I think he would do better in a tournament of all-time greats if you matched them up.
Well, I'm only saying because Leonard, Mayweather's career hopefully is over, though they're talking about him fighting Pacquiao, so you have a little distance. I think it was ridiculous that he, just to break Marciano's record, he fought a kickboxer, which was to me absurd. He could have fought any fighter. I would have given him more credibility. He just wanted to be 50. The fact that the commission even allowed that to me is an outrage. That a guy who's the best fighter in the world it's like Joe Louis, fighting Antonino Rocca at the end of his career. He might have done it in an exhibition. Nobody would have approved that as a fight.
Well, can you imagine that if Louis had done that?
Right.
We're laughing like it's a big joke, but Mayweather did that in actuality.
And the commission approved it. Or Mickey Mantle fighting Rocky Marciano in 1955. It would be insane. But he got away with it just so he could break a record. Look, I'm just saying we have the distance. Jack knows I was on the Hall of Fame steering committee for 25 years. And, they had 5 years like baseball does between the end of the career and you're getting voted in the Hall of Fame. So he had some perspective. So at least with Mayweather have a perspective. Crawford may surpass him. Right now, to me, he's still a work in progress. He's still not at the end. I think he just had his greatest victory. Let's see what happens.
He's 42-0.
Yeah.
If Crawford decides to stick around for 9 fights and remain unbeaten, go 51-0, and score a couple of major victories in the 9 fights.
Yeah, that could never happen. There aren't 9 guys out there qualified to fight him to add to that legacy. He's going to fight 2 or 3 more times. That's all.
See, Frank,
I agree with you, but if he decides he's going to stick around for 4 more years and he can retain his skills, it's going to be a push.
It is.
It's not. He's going to retire 44-0 probably.
I agree. I'm saying hypothetically, Frank. There's always the outside possibility he's going to fight indefinitely. You look at Bernard Hopkins. He might pull a Bernard Hopkins and continue indefinitely. And
That's really an anomaly.
And what'll happen, guys, that'll hurt his career. Like Roy Jones is almost dismissed today because of the knockout losses to guys like Danny Green and Glenn Johnson late in his career.
He's fought himself out of the whole. He's fought himself out of the legacy.
Yeah. The strange thing is a fighter who has now overcome that. In his time, he wasn't perceived that way. Ezzard Charles, at the end, he fought too long. And most of the fights people saw him on TV was when he was past his peak as a heavyweight, when he was really a great light heavy. Yet his reputation has been completely restored. I'll give you an example. Ezzard Charles did not get into the Ring Hall of Fame until 1971, almost 15 years after he had his last fight. When he went into Canastota in '89, he went in the first year of eligibility. So there's a career that, despite losses to Dick Richardson and Johnny Holman at the end of his career, he's been revitalized by people who now examine the record on BoxRec and can look at it more objectively than at the time. But when he was fighting, people said he was an excellent fighter, but nobody was saying he was among the greatest of all time. That's a whole change. But I'm saying he was able to overcome those losses. At this point, Roy Jones hasn't. Maybe as years go by, people say, well, just dismiss the last part of his career. But I always, when I evaluate fighters, we can say, well, he would have beat him on style. I don't know that. I go on accomplishments. Floyd Mayweather has defeated 8 Hall of Famers. Now, whether the Hall of Famers deserve to be in or out, everybody in the Hall of Fame is a good fighter at the very least. I can't see that kind of record with Crawford. He's beaten one great fighter, Canelo, and no one else. Not his fault.
Well, he beat Sean Porter,
yeah,
who's on the ballot for the Hall of Fame. Errol Spence, more likely than not, I think is going to get into the Hall of Fame.
Right. But if you look at the legacy of Mayweather, you got Cotto, you got Pacquiao, you got
he beat Amir Khan too, Crawford, who's going to
wait a second though, Don and Jack. Okay, now let me give you the other side to that, Don. Yes, he beat Cotto, he beat Pacquiao, he beat De La Hoya, he beat Mosley. But how many guys beat those guys before Floyd fought them and beat them more impressively? Pacquiao was knocked out for 2 minutes by Marquez 3 years before he fought Mayweather. Shane Mosley in 2000 beat De La Hoya much more convincingly than Mayweather did 7 years later. And I can go on and on. So you can say, yes, they are good names. But when he fought them, they were well past their sell-by date. So to me, his best win is probably against Diego Corrales, who was in his prime, who was a killer at the time, and Mayweather was like a slight favorite going in there. So I think that's an outstanding win. Even the Canelo win, Don, he made him come in at 152. It was Canelo's first big fight. It's like he fought him before he's good. That would be like Usyk fighting Itama now. I'll get him before he's good. So all those wins you talk about Mayweather, I think that there's an asterisk next to them.
I could do that. Jack Johnson, of all the great fighters, the hardest one, I think he's a great fighter. I've been told he's a great fighter. I give him credit as great. I rate him among the greatest of all time. But if I break down his record, his best wins are over Sam Langford, who he outweighed by 30 pounds.
Ketchel.
Tommy Burns, Ketchel. He fought a 40-something-year-old Bob Fitzsimmons. So he has the names on record for his wins. But as you say, put it in context. But still, Floyd does have an amazing body of work and multiple titles and everything else. So, history will judge. I say Crawford still has a career ahead of him. Will he do what Roy Jones and hang around too long? I hope not.
I think he only fights a couple more times.
You were very friendly with the eccentric newsletter editor, Flash Gordon, who came up with this boxing newsletter. I don't know, were you familiar with him, Frank? But he was very radical. And when Jack Dempsey passed away, instead of saying something glowingly about Dempsey, Flash lit into Dempsey, in the first column, and he said he beat one big piece of garbage in Jess Willard. That was his accomplishment. And they didn't use the word garbage. I can't repeat the word.
I'll tell you, ironically, when Flash did his rate, I have his book here. I don't want to leave the screen. He rated the top heavyweights, and he was in his late 20s. And the number one heavyweight of all time, Jack Dempsey.
Who was that?
Flash Gordon, when he rated his heavyweight.
How do you like that?
Ahead of Joe Louis.
But you talk about the weight. I was talking to Frank early in the show. about Tank Davis and Jake Paul, and I don't mean to make this about them or talk about them, but Frank was adamantly against the fight and against Davis's chances because the weight difference is too massive.
Mhm.
And I said to Frank, no, Davis is so superior to Jake Paul if Tank Davis shows up at the top of his game.
Mhm.
And I said to Frank, fighters used to do this years ago. It's not divisions like
Yeah.
Sam Langford. He'd fight a guy 40 pounds heavier, but if he was way superior to that guy, it wouldn't matter.
Tank's not Sam Langford.
Yeah. Well, that's the question. I don't know about, is Paul a fighter, Frank? Is he really a fighter? If he just as a fighter, forgetting about fighting these names, if he went in as a fighter competitively in his division, how would he do?
I think he's a borderline journeyman, maybe a bottom 10 contender.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And I think that's being
Not good, a
nice to
legitimate
him.
Top 10 contender. You'd have to really push the rating.
But Jack, bottom 10, I said. We know how he could, if he picked a weight class and he stays,
a sanctioning body will get him in.
he
the
might
top
get
10
he
rating.
he might get a top 10 ranking. I'll give him that. John, let me ask you this. We only have a couple minutes left. And it's an old question, but today's Larry Holmes' birthday. We talked about him earlier. Larry Holmes is 76 today. God bless him.
Happy birthday.
Where does he fall in your pantheon of, say, the 10 best heavyweights ever?
Oh, definitely in the top 10, no question about it. One of the great fighters of all time. Again, he got caught in his first iteration. He was in the shadow of Muhammad Ali. And in the second, he was in the shadow of George Foreman. He was caught between two of the greatest personalities in boxing history.
And Mike Tyson kind of overshadowed him too a little bit.
Tyson as well with the comeback. It's sort of like what we talk about Charles. He was between Joe Louis and Rocky Marciano. So as good as he wasn't getting the recognition. But I think you got to say, I think what do you have? 19 title defenses. People forget after he got knocked out by Tyson, he came back and had 20 more fights.
But I can
Before
use
good
the argument,
fighters.
title defenses. I agree with you what you said about Holmes. But look at Vladimir Klitschko, all of his title defenses. And when you talk about the greatest heavyweights of all time, very few people put Vladimir Klitschko in their top 10.
Yeah. I think there's an American prejudice against that to some degree. And there are memories of Klitschko getting, beaten on the way up. Didn't he lose to Chris Bird, wasn't it? Or
Yeah, and well, that was Vitali.
Vitali.
Vladimir-
He lost to Ross Purity the first time.
Right. And then we remember the loss to Tyson Fury, again, the end of his career, unfortunately. But sometimes it's big fight syndrome. People remember you by the biggest fight you had. The anomaly, I always make this comparison. Billy Conn is remembered more for a fight he lost to Joe Louis than any fight he ever won. John Henry Lewis, if you look at his career, he's sort of like the Ezzard Charles of the 30s. People forget him.
He's one of the great light heavyweights.
He got knocked out in one round with Joe Louis. At the last fight with a detached retina, he's completely dismissed. Not the fact he was an undefeated champ, not the fact that he beat Jimmy Braddock when he was 17 years of age and Maxie Rosen by the time he was 18 years of age and had 8 successful defenses of the title. He's wiped out. So Klitschko suffers from that. But I still think
I think Michael Spink suffers from that too, Don.
No, I don't think it's much. I saw a person on social media ask a question, who would have won a fight between Roy Jones and Michael Spinks?
Oh.
And I was pleasantly surprised to see that Spinks held an edge in the comments made by the fans. Like it's like a 60-40 edge or something. But those fans know how great Roy Jones was, but I don't think it's really hurt Spinks' legacy. He's remembered for it.
Yeah.
It's his defining fight that you remember him by, but I think people are willing to give him a pass on that fight.
As time has gone by, Jack, I would agree. I would agree with that.
Yeah, time.
I think Michael Spinks is one of the all-time greats.
Yes, he is, and he's so mild. And when they talked about greatest pound for pound, it was Hearns and Hagler, and he was never considered in that group. I will tell you this: Butch Lewis, I worked for as a matchmaker, and we after the Hearns Hagler fight, I ran to Butch's. This is the match: Hagler and Spinks, and we offered that fight, and it was turned down without question.
Hagler wanted no part of it. I'm so glad you said that, Don. I've told that story countless times, and Hagler wanted, and I'm not going to put Hagler down because he's a natural middleweight.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to breaking ties with some other guys, they took the risk. He didn't.
Yes, Mickey Walker would have taken that fight, and so would have Harry Greb.
Yeah.
That's a great point. You're right, and I have Mickey Walker very high too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have Greb second all time pound for pound.
And your
Okay, Don, a lot. We had a ton of fun, Don. You know, we
Thank you.
definitely want you to come back at some point, you know.
Two great
And I
guys.
wish we had you on a little earlier. We didn't realize, you know, we could keep going.
Yeah,
But,
well,
Hey, Don,
but the show's
Yes, sir.
coming, you know, final bell's about to ring in this show.
Don, I don't want to put you on the spot, but this is really going well. Jack is not going to be here next week. Would you
Oh.
mind co-hosting the show with me?
Jack, I don't know. That's a big,
It's
big
my
round.
birthday next week, so I'm
Oh my
going-
Yeah,
God! Happy birthday!
I'm taking the night off.
Yeah,
But Don, we could talk history and go over
Yeah.
some things like that. I think it would be really good.
I could never fill Jack's shoes, but I'll put my toe in there if you want me to for a minute. But yeah, all right, Jack. Happy birthday. God bless you. Call me, Frank. Call me, Jack. Whatever you want to do.
Jack,
I'll-
give me Don's number, and I'll call you during the week, Don.
Thank
Okay.
you, Frank. Thank you both.
Okay, guys.
Thanks for
Good
the
night,
opportunity.
everyone.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.